All right, I've got the video recording again, although I'm a little concerned that the audio may not have recorded in the video last time at all, which would kind of ruin the whole thing. Um, so let me just kind of talk through the changes that I have made. Like the concerns that the person who owns this code had is a couple of things. One of them is just like, am I overusing tuples, and am I like I don't like how much stuff ended up being static. And a lot of times things end up becoming static because you're having a hard time figuring out how things should get a hold of the object. Um, and so like just as an example, here's this like level manager, and if you just or this input manager, like, this is a static method. And if this is static, it's really easy. Like you can access it from anywhere, which is great, but it does limit, like static is not object oriented. It limits your ability to change things around. So as an example, like this is 100% about mouse and keyboard. And if we wanted to do input based on like an Xbox controller, or I like not that you'd want to do this, but like maybe like you could like record keystroke events and then load them, like save them to a file and then load them from the file, so you can like do like replay or something like that. Like um you like this wouldn't be what you'd want to do. And the problem is, because of how this is static, like this code here is like locked into hard dependency on that very specific way of doing it, which is limiting. Good object oriented design will allow us to change our mind about things as we go. And so if we can get away from like not everything should be, not everything we shouldn't always skip static. It's a good, like the math class is a really good example of it. It's like it's not that there isn't more than one way to do it. We're not going to change our minds about how to do math.min and math.max. And it's okay for us to be like committed to doing it a very particular way. Um, other like But if we want that flexibility to change our mind about things, then we want to use like quote unquote true object oriented stuff. Um so with that said, like when you get to a point where you're like, you know what, I don't like this anymore, the trick is to figure out a way to get to where you think you want to go, um, with the least amount of pain. And there's a couple of things that go into that. One of them is I don't usually know what I want. Like I don't know what I'm looking for until um until I kind of am there. Like I can't be sure that what I'm doing is the right thing until I see it and can kind of experience it and say, yeah, this is it. Until then, it's just like a series of little tweaks to like, what about this? What about that? And so I like to do these. I use Git. I'm not going to go into Git too much, but I just commit all that stuff just so I have a clean slate. But it creates these save points where I can make some progress and say, I like this. I'm going to commit. And now I have a new save point, or I can say, oh no, I don't like this, and I can just revert it and just go back to where I was, and I don't have to like manage the undo, redo history or anything like that. It's not that I don't use undo, redo, but like it's just at a different level, and it works pretty well. So I like that. Um, in terms of being able to like tinker and like try out a thing and see what I think. But the other thing is once that you start to kind of get a feel for what you're doing, you like most things I think can be broken down into very specific um like small baby steps. Like you can get there with a series of small steps. There's all these like refactoring these things in little teeny ways to get to the big change. And so it does, like you don't have to like put everything on hold and make a massive sprawling change. You can work your way there incrementally, and that allows you to like do a little bit of cleanup and refactoring, and then do a little bit of new feature development, and then do a little bit of cleanup, and then do a new feature, and then it's like you don't have to stop progress on the cool new features to get to work yourself to clean code. You just have to make a conscientious choice, because there will always be time pressure to like hurry up and get it done, to keep delivering new features. And if you as a program, the only people who are going to really understand the limits of like the state of the code. Everybody else is honestly assuming that you've got really good code. um so you as a programmer have to kind of figure this out, and say it's time to do this, and just weave it into your daily work. All right, so first things first, like I said, this is a good example of this. Like, I've got this input manager, it's static. One thing, so we did this yesterday when I was messing with this stuff. Like, you can take little steps, and one of the things that like, given that all this is static, one of these little hops that you can take in this case is to go from everything is static to everything is not static, but it's the singleton pattern. And the singleton pattern is basically that there's only one instance that's ever created, and then that instance is stored somewhere that is accessible through a static way. So everything is an instance, other than there's one instance, and you access that through a non-instance thing. So this is a terrible example, but if you just had, like, just to illustrate, like, if you had public int x, public int y, singleton pattern would say, if there's a single point, like, so this is out of all the examples, this is the worst of them all. But I'm still going to do it anyway. Like, what you would do, like in a C# world, what you'd probably do is you'd have public static point instance equals new point, right? So you do that, and then, like, you would have a private constructor. And now if you're somewhere else, let's see if I can just find a method, then you would do point dot instance dot x. So, like, there is an instance, and you access it statically. But that gives you just a little bit more wiggle room, and it moves you toward this idea of, rather than having, public static int x and public static int y, you do that, and that moves you down that path. So I will say, like, this code has a lot of singletons. Like, the singleton patterns are used pretty heavily here, and so this person's familiar with it. And like I said, these things where it was just static, that's a good stepping stone. It moves us in the right direction. So I want to just work through this here. This is probably not doing what they thought it was going to do. It doesn't initialize this and this. Anyway, so, like, if we do something like this, so we'll do public static input manager instance equals new. And then let's make that a property, and we'll make this not static, and we'll make this not static. All of these will be, so basically all these will be instance based. And this class is, I think, well, like, it's ready for it. That was pretty straightforward. Just looking at this, like, why not make this one an expression body? Like, everything else here is an expression body. Let's okay, little white space changes here. again, like for fields, I will typically do them on their own line. And so again, like what we're seeing here is like mouse state wasn't like what we just had is more like this. Like we weren't actually initializing the previous state. While we're in here, like the convention for private fields would be to start with an underscore. So I'm going to do that just so it's more conventional. Partly this helps me like because I'm so familiar with that convention. Okay. I'm going to do clean up those unused using directives, and then I'm going to change this to be and get it to do it. Change to file scope namespace. Is there a way to say, yeah, let's just do this throughout the whole thing. Okay, at this point, I'm sure I have some compiler errors because all these things are saying input manager, and what I need to do is just go after the one instance, which like, so now this code right here is getting more complicated. Um, but it's moving us in a useful direction, I think. So now the question is like find find all references. So the question now is can we work through this so that these things have an instance that isn't like because right now like there's it's still kind of locked into I'm going to use this one specific instance um and there so the singleton pattern actually like the Gang of Four design patterns book sort of like for lack of a better word introduced this kind of the general concept of patterns but also the this specific singleton pattern and this is one that some of the authors have been like yeah that wasn't a good pattern like this is there are people who consider singleton an anti-pattern and that is because you don't need to it's possible to just have a single instance without requiring that the class be limited to a single instance and so it's more flexible if you don't use singleton pattern, which kind of defeats the purpose to have, you know, limiting a design that's limiting in that way. But I do think that this is a good step in the evolution of this to a instance based thing. So I'm okay with it as it stands. So I'm my next step here is I'm just looking to see if there's an easy way for input to for us to like move away from the singleton. Um, and so in order to get rid of the singleton thing, we need to create. We obviously still need an input manager. That's a part of the system that we need. But what we need is all these things to get a hold of an instance through other means. And and that means there's like one, two, three, four, five classes that need to be given that need to get a hold of that reference. I do think that this game manager could just create one. Like this guy could just create an instance. But so like that would make sense. But what about um, these other ones? So like player, how would this um, I like as I see stuff like this, like so this just literally calls the base class one. We don't need to have that. So when I see stuff like that, I'm gonna clean it up as long as I'm confident that that's the case. Um, Same with something like maybe this might be useful to the person who wrote that code originally. But it's just one more thing for me to think about when I'm messing with the code. And so as long as I know, because here's the thing is I'm not going to be adding new features. So this stuff might be primed and ready, like maybe add a death animation, right? Like, but I don't need that. So I'm going to just delete that stuff because it's less code for me to think about. And same with this kind of stuff. I tend to be like to write fairly like dense code. And so stuff like that. Like I won't include the curly braces if I don't need to. Um, I love this little like mental struggle. Like, do I need this? Do I not need this? And kind of documenting the whole journey. It kind of like the like this is actually, despite the fact that I'm finding some humor in it, this is what comments are for. Is like, what what needs to be said about this that isn't that you can't just glean from the code quickly and directly. Um, like why did we do it this way? And what's the information that fed into this? So anyway, it's direction. Okay, I'm just thinking out loud here. Like, I was hoping this player class would make this easy to just get the input manager passed in. And I mean, like, let's see, this is called from update. So for example, if we change the signature of update to have an input manager, it would be here, right? But the other possibility would be to pass in an input manager like this, and then private read-only in input manager like that, and then we just save it off here like that, and then down here we can say skip the singleton like that, which is, I mean, that works great, other than this was being called, and this needs. So like one thing I can do here is just kind of punt on it. Like I can say, I'm just going to pass that in. So now player doesn't have that dependency, but we are still using it technically. And pass that in there. Okay. I feel like there should be a refresh button here. So, okay, I said this one, I think this one's fairly easy. Like if we just say um, private read-only input manager equals input manager dot instance. Just put that in here. Then all these places that we are doing this, we can say input manager dot instance dot update. It is one like there a lot of these have this input manager dot update. There's a part of me that thinks like why wouldn't we just do that all the time? Like why does that matter? Like why wouldn't we just have the input manager update? So, and then we can do basically the same thing here. We can say, let's see where this is called from. This is called from character selector. Except this says it's not. Oh, okay. It has no references, but this is a static instructor. Okay, that's going to be like we're not going to be able to. Okay, so we can do this. So private read only input manager, and then in here we can do input manager equals input manager. So same thing here where we just do pass in the input manager, and then this place would need to do input manager dot instance. There's the refresh button. I don't know. It was just blind before. We can do the same thing in all of these. Tile editor is the last one that I feel like is. Let's commit this. We're in an okay place here. This thing has one. Like I feel like in order for us to solve this, like go all the way to like this thing is already static. Did I? This guy needs an input manager. Like that. Let's see what else isn't building. Every place that we're creating a button. So, I mean, again, like I said, we're looking at these little baby steps. And so we could do input manager equals input manager dot instance. And then like even this, like this is a tiny little step. I didn't change the behavior here at all. Um, but just making progress down this pathway of like it's like I'm still using that instance, but now like the rest of this code will be easier if I do end up changing this away from it, which is the goal. Like I said, I think the catch here is that like I think I have to de-static this class before that'll work. Which like we can do that. I don't I don't that looks like a Scandinavian language. I also deleted the under construction partly because I guess in my head I feel like literally everything is under construction. Nothing ever gets done. Those are okay. Um, it's interesting that these go like they're 32 by 32, but these are like 33. There might be a reason for that that I'm not aware of, but that's okay. So if I'm gonna remove the static from this, I actually the one I'd rather focus on in terms of removing that is this stuff because these are let's see. That one might not be used. It's commented out. Game over elements. That one's used. HUD. Hey, somebody dropped in. Hey, James. Let me open up the chat so I can actually see what's going on in case somebody says something. James M. I'm just. This is somebody submitted this code and they were frustrated about just not knowing what to do in terms of like software design. And they were complaining about how much static they had, and they're like, I wish I didn't have as much static stuff, but I don't really know what to do. So I said, send me the code. I'll tinker with it for a bit because I like doing this kind of stuff. That's what I'm doing. It is interesting to me that this class isn't static, but I feel like quick check. Let's see if there's anything in here that'll blow up if I. Nope. So for all practical purposes, it's a static class. And well, those are private. Oh, okay. So there's this update, and this is saying. You know what I'm gonna do? This is a list of UI elements. I'm gonna just make another class here. Public class screen. I'm gonna make a. You know what? For the moment, I'm just gonna keep it simple. I don't public list UI element. Basically, I'm going to move this stuff into this screen class. So what I'm going to do is have private screen main menu equals new, and then down here. So I don't need to do that anymore. What I do need to do is say main menu dot elements add. So essentially, I've just like literally all I've done here is I've made a wrapper around this, but I think that'll make it easier to do interesting stuff with it in the future. And I can, again, like the idea here with refactoring is the smaller the changes, the easier it is. It's like I can make a one little change and be fairly happy with that one little change. This is plain. And so the more often I can just stop in the middle of stuff, the better off I'll be. Because like I said, I mean, yeah, at this point, like I can commit what I'm doing. And if all of a sudden somebody said, we got to move on to the new feature, like I could stop here if I needed to. Is it ideal? Maybe not, because like some of these are using a screen and some are using this, but it's progress, and any progress towards the finish line, the goal is good progress. And As I'm seeing these, I wonder if I should call that like pause screen. I'm just going to do all these though. Um, let's see. Okay. Don't need these. These are taken care of. I have a typo on my victory screen. Yeah, it's so the I don't know what the hotkey was. Remind me what I was doing. Was it the rename? It was the rename. Um, it's a so right click on this. I can find it in here. It's this. So it's Control R, comma Control R. So it's like a multi-key thing. So what I usually do is I just select a thing. I put my pinky key on my pinky key, my pinky finger on the control key, and then I use my pointer finger to hit the R. And then down here at the bottom it says Control R was pressed, waiting for second key of the chord. And so I release the R key, but I still have my pinky on the control key, and then I hit R again, and then it brings that up, and then you can type in what you want, and then poof, it's done. It does it like every once in a while there'll be something that doesn't work, but that's pretty rare. So that was just a little like there's not I didn't do a whole lot there. Um, Other than just now there's just a screen that manages all these elements. But I think that that sets us up for more interesting stuff, including so like I look at this stuff here and my eyes kind of glaze over. This is very dense, and frankly, UI code tends to be this way. Like this is unfortunately the nature of UI code. We can simplify it, and I think it's worth trying to do that here. Um, because a lot of what's making this complicated is just it's just a lot of data, and there might be ways we can like tweak the data to like make this easier to do stuff with. Okay. Another thing I'm noticing here is like so each of these are again my personal preference for code style is more dense than a lot of people, so I'm hijacking this code and doing what I would do. But like consider all of these do the same thing just with a different thing, and we even if with just a list of UI elements we could have left it that way. um but now that we have a screen, like we could, well, so first of all, one thing we could do now is we could simplify this. Let's see, we come into here and make screen have void update. And we could probably, I think there was update and draw. Like that. Just, oh. So all of these are doing that with the exception of this thing. And of course, some of these that do nothing. We can handle the doing nothing separately, but I guess what I'm going for here is, can we make it so that this just like says, hey, figure out the right screen and then draw that? Because what I have done here is now with this, I can just say main menu dot update. And same with this, only it'll be the playing screen. And this will be game over screen dot update. And then this can be be nice. So yeah, the HUD. It'd be nice to get that in there somehow. And what I think I want to do, like there's this HUD, and I feel like this is like these are elements. Yeah, static UI element and UI element. Like, what if we? So this, I mean, essentially, this just has, it's got a handful of these things here, and we could like so this update and this draw exactly matches what we want it to be. And if we just make this a UI element, oh, well, that's probably the reason this person didn't do that, and that is that like the base class's constructor is a lot there, but does it need to be? Like, what if there was a constructor that didn't have that? Am I sold on this? No. So it's interesting that's complaining about that. It does exist. Okay, it does not implement inherited abstract member. It does exist. It's just, and that's what this is saying is just have to override it. Like it was all there. It's all working. I was creating a new method. Anyway, so now this thing, even though it's a composite UI element, like it has multiple children, it's able to just hand that off to its children, and now it just fits into the system, which means I don't remember where I was at before this. Control minus and go back. Let's see. Like at this point, we could, what was the thing that was using that? It's the playing screen. So if we come in, Oh, well, that's interesting. It's interesting to me that like these other ones down in here. Oh, dot elements. Okay, there we go. So now, like the HUD doesn't have to be treated specially, and I like that. It's its own control, and you can do whatever you need to do as long as you derive from UI element. Then you've got it. But now, theoretically, I don't need to like manually do that, and I don't need to manually do that because when you say draw, this comes into here and it just does that to all the elements. So in terms of like again like making that screen class made it easier to um, just evolve the system better than what we had before. At this point, I don't need this separate HUD because that's just part of the playing screen. And now it's been, let's see, let's make sure this compiles, and then actually let's see if it does what we expect it to do when we run it. Had a few more people drop into the chat. So let me describe briefly what I'm doing once again, which is somebody had submitted this code. They were frustrated with like just not knowing what to do with object-oriented design, software design, which I think is like a lot of people are in that state of like, I just don't know what to do. Like I can recognize that I'm doing stuff wrong, but I don't know what to do to actually make it better. So I said, send me the code, I'll tinker with it, and we'll see. Because I like doing this kind of stuff. It also helps me understand better what issues people are facing so that I can make um, my book better and future books that I write. I'd like to write a software design book. Not that there's a shortage of those, there's a million of them out there, but um, anyway, so the concerns this person had was mostly about there's just so much like static stuff. Like as you can see here, like there's still a lot of static stuff. So that's kind of like the high level goal of what I'm working on. But in the meantime, in order that at a high level, the philosophy that I'm taking here is we can probably get where we want to go with a series of little teeny steps. And so I'm making these little steps that I feel like help break up the logjam and make it a little easier to forward with things. Let's run this and see. Oh no, let's see. Okay, so current game hasn't been initialized here. Yeah, all right. I feel like I already dealt with one of these yesterday when we were doing this. So the score render, the current game doesn't exist yet. That's this thing here. Who does set that up? Or what? I feel like I did something. Yeah, it was this. It was this right here. I I'm gonna like I don't love this, but if I just take this and move it down here to this in content load. Oh, maybe I only got halfway done with that. All right, because that is the thing. All right, let's run that again. These are things from yesterday. So the enemy hasn't been initialized yet, which think I think I'm just failing to do that. I don't. So there's these little bugs, and like some of them might have, like I basically was gifted this code for an experiment, and I don't know if these bugs were already existing. Like I know this one where you can eat the world, like I just did there, where I like cut into the. That existed. Okay. Generally speaking, it sure seems like things are working. Like the UI is rendering. Things are good. Anyway, yeah. I in all my little changes, I might have broken stuff. If I did, I don't know enough about this code to know, and I'm not going to spend the time to figure it out. So I might have broken stuff. I don't think I did, but there's no way to know. I mean, there is a way to know. I could go back to the oldest commit and try it there and compare, but it's not worth that right now. So let's see. Back to where we were. Here. So I think like one of the things about this now is that this update and this draw essentially do the same thing. So first of all, what I was talking about this a minute ago about how this just does nothing. If if a case isn't handled in a switch, not like nothing happens anyway. So this code now is functionally identical to what I had. Same with this. And same up here. If I don't have the thing, nothing bad happens. So I haven't changed any behavior here. But now I'm going to refactor this again into like a switch expression. So what I'll do is I'll say screen active equals game manager dot current game dot current game state switch. And then so if it's game state dot main menu, then we'll use menu. If it's game state dot pause, I don't know that we had a restart, did we? So first of all, I'm going to allow this to be null. I don't like there wasn't a screen for all of these. So what am I missing? Let's see. So play, pause, game over, victory, main menu. There's 5 of them. And if it's anything else, we will use null. Do a little bit of white space alignment. And now at this point, we'll just say active question mark dot update anytime. So if it's null, it will do nothing. That's a null check right there. And then I can delete that. Now, so one thing I will say is like this handled main menu playing and game over. And technically, This means like we weren't rendering anything for victory or paused. I don't think there was any controls in there to update. Like I don't think that's going to change behavior. This one also only has four, like it's missing the paused one as well. And maybe pause either doesn't work or is handled like elsewhere, but like I would imagine like it could make sense to bring it into the fold here and kind of make them the same system. So the same, basically at this point, the draw is the same thing, other than we'll just say draw sprite batch like that. Now I have duplicate code here and here, and what we can do is do private static screen active lookup active screen game manager dot game state. And then we can just do this. And then we just call that. Like that. I'm going all this like dead stuff I'm going to delete. I I mean this was all like a work in progress, and it could still be a work in progress, right? Like this is, but I just like for me I won't do this. Like I'm not going to tinker with this long enough to ever do it. And so for me, for my purposes right now, it's dead code, and I might as well just get rid of it. Because then there's just less for, like I said, this UI code has this tendency to be very data heavy and just kind of dense stuff. And I'm trying to simplify that. Um, but I think we could make this a little less dense. One of these things about this is, like, let's suppose we made a little static helper method here, private static. So we make it a thing that will like return this stuff. How much of that am I going to be able to clean up? Some, like if I just said, well, because I'm gonna like in order to do this, there's a bunch of this stuff that has to be passed in. Okay, I take it back. That's not a very helpful thing. Yeah, at least not yet. I think it could be. The other thing here, though, is one of the things that makes this really dense is all these names. We've created like an extra layer of abstraction, and like there's an upside to that. Like for example, I have no clue what object state is. That can't be far, right? Object state. It's an action change. Okay, I think I understand what that's doing. It is interesting how that's got that set up. So it's an action that just says it calls this change game state. This is when you push the button. All right. Anyway, it's stuff like, so there's this one, game over text, victory text, like all these buttons. It might be nice to somehow like simplify some of this, but like I I think like there's a lot of people out there who will say, well, you shouldn't just, so let's see, button background find. Yeah, okay. Where they'll say, you shouldn't okay, I'm going somewhere with this, but I am having a different thought with it too. One does have a lot of these are 0. Okay, what I was gonna say is like this game over button origin, like I'm using that and I'm using it down here, right? For me, like when I see this, like this line of code just is inundating. I have a hard time reading it, and again, I don't blame the person who wrote this. UI code tends to be pretty dense anyway, and there is this school of thought that they'll they'll beat it into your head in like a course, like at a university or college or something like that. They'll just no magic, no magic numbers, no magic whatever. Um, I make an argument that vector 2.0 is not a magic number already. Um, and that I don't know that like throwing that in there makes it any easier to understand what it is to have this game over button origin. And I think the only downside to like to me this is a lot clearer. Like I instantly know the type and I know like what it's doing. Um, and now there's also less, like I have one fewer variable to think about up here. Like it's the only downside, and this is the nature of software development, is pros and cons to everything. And so you have to take into account like what benefits am I getting, what downsides am I are going to come with that, and am I willing to accept those downsides, or should I find something that has a different set of trade-offs? Well, in this case for me, like the downside here is I actually don't know like what this is being passed to. The other one actually had a hint. It was game over button origin, right? And so I knew that it was related to the origin. So maybe like that is the upside to what was there, is like I have this hint of like what it's for. Um, even this one, like there's a bunch of these that are like whatever dot zero vector, and yeah, like all of these are doing that, and there's only one that isn't, and it's this. And so I guess I'm gonna just, for what it's worth, like right there, we back that up a bit. This is another one of those. Okay, not that one. This right here is another one of those things. Like if there's a reason for these to be in sync, if they must be in sync, then maybe there's more of a compelling reason to do it. Because if I just do vector 2.0 and then I change one, I may forget to change the other. Having a variable for that makes that easier to sort through. How many of these other ones? I rename this, put a T on there, game over text. Oh, there's another one. Maybe that's why they undo. I still don't like that name, but at least I see the reason why. What I'm trying to do is figure out a way to like capture some of this. It's like some of like this is maybe another example of this like main text. Like if I if I just do that like again this I think illustrates the idea more is that there will be people who will say why like this is a magic string. um you shouldn't have that, you should always name it. But when what people like often do in that is they'll do something like this const string tech what is this menu or like play text equals play like that didn't it didn't help me. And it just added an extra thing to think about. Um, this is for me. This is pretty straightforward, and it's just like I said, one less thing, one shorter thing. And I wonder how many of these other ones. So game over text. Like if we do, we'll probably do that with a lot of these. And again, you might have a professor who says, no, do not do that under any circumstance. And if that's the case, if you've got, if there's, your style guide, if your teacher, if your boss is saying, don't do that, then you stick with the convention. You live with it. And heck, you might even just disagree with me flat out, which is fine too. You know what I'd like to do here? So this is, again, I'm just trying to make this code better. And I'm just kind of tinkering. Um, what I would like here with a button, and this some of this just comes from I've dealt with a lot of UI frameworks. Um, what I'd like is the ability to pass in not like the way this is working. I've already lost it. Where did it go? This right here, action on pressed, and then there's this click parameter, right? So oops. So like when the button is pushed, we call this passing in this parameter. What I'd like to do is generalize it. I like because right now I mean it is fairly general. Um so I maybe this isn't that weird or bad or anything. I actually, you know what? Let's see, size one. Do I need those for other parameters? I guess I do. It's these. Okay, so this and this are related to yeah, yeah. Okay. Like I guess what I'd like to do here instead of having this pass in this vict yeah, this object state, which is I'm gonna rename this because it to make it um and this is the parameter, but like I guess what if instead of both of these, what if we made button? This might be a lot to bite off all at once. What if we um, so first I'm going to rename this to, this is the thing to do when you click it. Actually, click command. Let's rename that one as well. And like what I'd like to do is like collapse these into one and just make this that. Delete this, which is going to break all of 6 of these. Now, so we were talking about refactoring and how it's good to do like one step at a time. Yeah, the smaller the steps that you can break it down into, the better off you are. We have 6 references here, and I feel like that's manageable. If I felt like it weren't manageable, like if it weren't 6 but 600, then what I would probably do is I'd make another. This is a constructor, so I'd make another constructor that has a different parameter list. Make it so the new way can work without breaking the old way, and then migrate the old stuff a little at a time when it's practical. And then delete the old stuff. I mark it obsolete or whatever it is, and depending on what I need to do. But in this case, I don't think that's needed because there's only 6 of these, and they're probably all. This is like, okay, button method equals select character. I'm going to make that not a class level thing. I'm going to move that down into here. But once again, like this is just like select character. So what I'll do is button value 1. See, once again, like I have to like keep hopping around. So 1 and 2. And what I'm going to do here is instead of this, what I'll do, instead of this button method, I'm just going to say, I'm going to use a lambda, which are really nice. So I'm just going to pass in a thing that says select, oops, I'm going to hit caps lock, select character 1. Other than this wraps lines here, I can make the text like to me this is easier to read than what we had, which was a there were 2 parameters, and b we had basically the select character as a variable that was called button method, and that it was way up here, and it just made like I have to understand about 10 lines of code that are spread out in different places versus what I have now, which is I've brought it all together in one place. And like I said, there's trade-offs there because again, like now I'm doing the same thing here. Like there's some, duplicate code there. Is that ideal? Well, I think it's okay because I think it's coincidental that both of these happen to call select character. And now I don't need like again, these names button value 1, button value 2 weren't adding a lot of value. They were adding more code. And this is one of those things that I think a lot of, I don't remember where I heard it, but my gut reaction to it was kind of annoyed the first time I heard it. And as I thought about it more, I came to agree with it. And that is this idea that code is a liability. Every line of code that you have is like a cost. You have to maintain it, you have to work with it, like you have to understand it, you have to all this stuff. The code is, you know, the code's the problem. It's the medium that we have to work with to deliver the value that the game, whatever it is. That's what's actually valuable here. Is the feature set, the word that the code supports. And the ability to change that code over time. That's what we're actually doing with code. So that's, I'm not saying that you should, since code's a liability, that you should um, squish everything into one line of code so you have fewer lines of code. No, obviously that's not the point. The point is that you know, having lots of code isn't necessarily a good thing. If you can do the same thing with simpler, less code, then that's better off, because anything that you write, you have to be able to maintain. So I guess like I said, my gut reaction when I first heard that was, no, that's not true. That's the that's the magic. That's the secret sauce. That's not a liability. That's what makes it work. But I think both of those can be true. It can be the cost while also being the product. Um, Much like how a bakery's product is, the flour. But you have to pay for the flour and the water and the yeast and the salt and the chocolate and the eggs and whatever. All right. Um, so this is the same thing that was going on here. There's this change game state that just, let's see, it just does this. Oops, I've already forgotten. Game state dot select character. And we'll just do game state dot select character. And select character game state. What is that? Select. Okay, I've already forgotten what I was doing here. Select. Okay, this is the parameter. And something like that, other than this. That's okay. Delete that and come down here to add. Okay, this is another one of those things. Like this looks surprising to me. That it was game over state equals game state dot restart. It makes sense once I see it all together, but at a glance over here, it was a little surprising because what this is saying, oops, is change to the restart state. When you, like, this is a button that when you click it, it will change to the restart state. And like I wonder if this is a bug, because this says like this is theoretically we're already in the victory state, and yet when you push the button, it goes to the victory state. So like, I don't know, it feels a little surprising, because I might have thought that when you do this it should be main menu or something. And I'm not trying to change functionality, but it feels more correct to me from what I know of the code, which is like, I'm not an expert at it. This isn't like I didn't write this in the first place, but let me put it this way. If this were production code, I don't think I would do that without doing some investigation to figure out Like, is that like what is the actual behavior? Because I'm making assumptions that on the victory screen, pushing the button doesn't already do something else. Like I would feel like I would want to look into that rather than just changing it. But in this case, low stakes, why not? One thing I could do to simplify that is I could do. That would change. I was gonna say I could take this game manager dot current game dot change game state, and I could like just put this in a variable. The catch is like that would, if the current game changes, which it can't right now, it's basically singleton. But if it did change, it would, this would like not, the way this is, it's captured the, it's like it well that doesn't actually capture anything. Like it always goes back to look up the current game versus what I would have done if I just made a local variable that stored that to simple to shorten these. It would have captured that specific instance of the game. So I'll leave that alone for now. But what I do like now is that this code here for these buttons. I have the text to display. I have the command to run, and now so there's, let's see. Do these, no, client bound. So the width divided by 2 and the height divided by 2 plus 100. So it's center it, but up a little bit. I wonder if they, so they all that way. That one's plus 300. I started going down this path, and I like if I guess at this point there's like, there's less to these buttons than there once were, and so maybe now it's a little more justified. Like we did private static button, create button, and then we pass in string, text, action, command. Let's call that click command. Um, string, font, button style, and this is just the, what is it, a rectangle or is it location? Like now this can just, let's see, return new button. And so now I can put in the text. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I won't cut that. I'll just copy it for the moment. So this can be the text. This can be the click command. This is the location. This is the style. This is the font. It's called button style. And I don't need to pass that in, which I like about that. And now I can just say create button victory. like that. I'm kind of spreading that out vertically instead of horizontally. I don't know that that makes it better, but these victory button cards, I think that's only used in one place, isn't it? Find all references. Yeah. Like I'm not, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I do wonder about, does this make it simpler to just do, just like this is really just a giant pile of data. And rather than having to like scroll up and down to like see what the data is, like to me, again, and if it's not this way to you, if you aren't convinced, do it your own way. Um, but to me, just I can see this and I feel like I can imagine what the button looks like a lot more readily. In fact, when it's written this way, it starts to feel like something that I could imagine loading it from like some sort of like file. And the file would look a lot like this. It's stuff like this that gets tricky though. Like this is code. This is like, you know, versus all of these that are just a bunch of data. Um, uh, like I wonder if we could do a similar thing for this animated spray, like a create whatever. It's like well, because I actually feel like a lot of this data. Okay, so that's a tuple. And again, the person or in the first place was like, why? Like, I don't. I wish I had used tuples less. So let's. I'm taking some guesses here. So this is current frame. This is like maybe the top left corner of the image within the whole sheet. Frame size is how big. I would have guessed a single one, and that might be true. I do wonder if this is. Yeah, okay. It's just a big one. This is 40 by 40. And then this is how many rows and columns, or like an X and Y. But so again, like a really easy way to up to like it's fine to start with tuples. If you want to move away from tuples, the easiest thing to do is a record. Public record, sprite, sheet, data, and then we just throw all that stuff in. So current frame, point, frame size, point, sheet size. And now the names are like real, unlike this stuff down here. And now I can do sprite, all that sprite sheet data. And all I have to do here is just new, just kind of new, and then the parentheses, and then new. Like, I don't know. But like having a concrete name for this thing makes a difference. It helps that the only time this stuff is used is in like private things. So the scope is pretty small here. I feel like did I get all three of those, or were there? I think, are there any more tuples up here? I don't see them. But I mean, why not just pass that in as a single bundle? Like, why not do sprite, sheet, data? We could go all the way down to this level, other than I think it's called that data. And so, okay, current frame is not like the default. When it generates this, it's going to generate it as a init. Like, it's going to generate this as the equivalent of public point current frame get init. It's going to generate it like that. And we're mixing and matching paradigms here. One thing at a time. So with that now, theoretically, okay, let me back up here. Is there like, okay, yeah, let me back up to here and just unpack this. And given what it is, we could do the deconstruction. That it'll unpack that because it's a record. It has that functionality built in. And so we just, yeah, like I said, it'll unpack it into these three separate variables. But are there any of these where this isn't 0, 0? Like, why even have that? And just looking through this, like I see new 0.00. Like, why can't we? And so I'm gonna assume this. I'm gonna simplify that a little bit. At this point now, I can since it's all bundled together anyway, I don't need to pass them all in individually. We just have a lot less code here. I did that wrong, didn't I? Back up. That was 3. But yeah, every single one of these defaults to new 0.00. So what if we like the only time this is ever used, that current frame is start at 0, 0. So what if we just assume that that's always going to be the case, and then simplify this? Like that. Because now at that point, I actually could probably take the data and leave it as like a single object. I don't have to unpack it anymore because this was the only thing that actually changes. I'm not going to deal with that right now. It's going to be okay. Like that code just got a lot simpler. Let's see. So once again, these are like the default here is white. So again, I'm going to just say color dot white. Because to me, that's easier. Like color dot white is very clear what that is versus something else. And again, if there's some deeper meaning to it, it's fine. Oops. So like I see this stuff here and I'm like, why wouldn't that? Why shouldn't that be part of this data? Is that always the case? Like, am I always passing in the size and the speed? Like, does it make sense to just bundle all that data together? Um, because that would definitely simplify some of the stuff if I came up to here and I said 2F100. So I'm going to include the speed, size, and speed. What were those? Float and int. Okay, it's interesting that this was 16, so I don't know that that's going to break anything, but I was not passing in 16. Something like that. And now, like I said, this other code over here that was complicated. Um, just got a lot simpler. I mean, I might have broken stuff in the process. Hopefully not, but I'm gonna delete. Why doesn't what? So let's see. This stuff doesn't pass that in, right? Oh, wait. Layer depth, origin, depth, rotation. Origin, depth, rotation. This has origin. Wait. Okay, that's fine. Like what's the default depth? Okay. So that when we said a depth of 1, that is being used. You know what? That's plenty for. It's like UI cleanup. Actually, it's probably. I maybe got 10 minutes left tonight. We wanted to. So let's see. The goal was generally to get rid of this static stuff. I think that if we. So again, like our the approach that we've used here is like if we just said public UI, get to where we're trying to go by using the singleton pattern as a stepping stone, not necessarily as our destination. Then we could just these like yeah, I'm gonna okay, I messed something up. Back up. Hmm. I'm gonna keep going here. That's not gonna compile, and that's gonna be okay for the moment. We'll deal with it. This can stay static. In order to sort this out, what we need to do is have a constructor. So we'll come in here with a public UI manager, and then we'll just do some of this initialization. Basically, we want that line. Some of this other stuff, like okay, something like that. And now let's see what's broken. Only 13 errors. That's so the good news is I might have broken some of these before. The good news is like it's only in like one place. That should make a difference. Yeah, this stuff I broke before. So no click parameter. So we remove that. This is in tile editor. I think this I broke before. This isn't the change I just barely broke. This is complaining. Let's see. So, okay. So button. So this is the same kind of thing where button, like, so button method. So this can just be open map file level manager dot level index. Okay, so that was all old stuff. And then this can be UI manager dot instance dot update. Other than, I say that, but like, so all these things are going to be this way, and we'll just do private read only UI manager. And so we've been going through the singleton pattern. Okay, well, we'll keep going with the singleton pattern here for a minute. This now, UI manager. Did something wrong. Did I do that? That is not what I meant to name that. I think it auto-completed. I'm going to blame it on that even if it wasn't. And so I'm going to do, okay. UI manager dot load content, UI manager dot update, UI manager dot draw, UI manager dot draw, manager dot draw, UI manager dot draw. I missed a curly brace. No. Oh. There we go. Scared when I see any errors. Yeah, I mean, that's the compiler is there to tell you when you're doing something that doesn't make sense, when you're doing something that is weird that it can't compile. Same with like compiler warnings. For what it's worth, I'm ignoring those. I shouldn't be. The problem is like, especially because I turned on the nullable stuff, like a lot of these are coming from that. And then I have these other 246 messages where it's like, yeah, ideally we'd go through all of those. Anyway, point is the compiler's just like, I've done something wrong and I just got to figure it out. So it's not like a problem. It's just the next step. So at this point now, this UI manager is doing this, but like, so I think I think we can delete this now. And the only thing we'll have to fix is instead of that, we'll have to come down here where we were doing that. This should, I forgot to get that one. UI manager dot update. Somewhere in here there was that. Oh, right here. We will do UI manager dot equals new UI manager, like that. I apparently can't make that because I'm initializing it here in content load, but so now our UI manager is not using static. It's not even using singleton. The singleton pattern. Okay, we can do more cleanup here. This I like in its own, move to its own file. This I feel like deserves to be, well, actually this deserves to be in a, not this file, but the place I want it is actually like in this file. Just a, okay, you're just thinking. So again, we're running out of time here, but the idea would be now the UI manager here is no longer static. Like we've made progress on this, and in this case, the game manager, it just creates the thing. It happens to create it in content load, which strikes me as a slightly weird place. In fact, if we're gonna do it this way, like why have like I would almost rather combine this and this load content so that you don't have to remember to do two steps. Let me move this constructor up here. Most people will prefer the constructor toward the top after the fields. So it just reads a little better with the constructor at the top. But yeah, if we just said, you know what, poof, there's one method. And now on this other place where I was doing this and then calling load content, now I just have to say new UI manager. The catch is like this idea of like we construct the object and then we'll load content when the content management system is ready. Kind of like this is a monogame like idiom. Like it makes sense in that world. And so it isn't that weird or wild to have separated it in that way. It fits the mold at least. Like it's not bad. I I need to be done, but I do want to just mention like one thing that I feel like we made it was that HUD. Let's see if I can find that really quick. Uh, search for it. This guy. We made this a UI element, and I I look at this and I think, well, there in a lot of UI systems there will be like a panel or some like base class. It's like a container for other controls, and we could take that and this screen thing that we made and like make them part of the same system. These like composite controls. I could also imagine having a screen base class. And like you see how like this code, like it has, so set up the main, all the main menu stuff. It has the playing screen stuff. It has the game over screen stuff. It has the victory screen stuff. Um, I could imagine having specific classes for each of those things. I feel like that sets us up, like it makes it easier to just like separate the logic for these different things, given that like I said, especially this kind of stuff, and just in every UI framework I've ever worked in, it just ends up being pretty dense. I think we've made some good improvements here, but it's still pretty dense, and it'd be nice to like when I'm trying to figure out what the heck is going on with the UI menu or the main menu, I can just zoom in on the main menu code and not have, you know, some of this other stuff hanging around that may or may not matter. And then I think that like a lot of this stuff could fold directly into that. It's just in the sense like so this has an update, and this is like so game manager is like the top level thing. Like I think game one is still. I find it interesting because I do it too. How often game one like this is like the file that the thing starts with, and the intent was that you rename it. Um, it's just kind of comical to me how often me included will just it just ends up being game one still. It's like this like monogame slash XNA from the before times. This like monogame trope. Anyway, at least I think you're meant to rename it. A lot of people don't, but this basically just passes through to the game manager, which is kind of where the meat of this program is. But like I do wonder here, like this update that like switches based on this, and so in the main menu, in the select character, in playing, in not in pause, but in game over, and not in this one for some reason. Well, that's because this just says move to the next level. Not in this restart. Like in a lot of these cases, it just not like I wonder if we played our cards right, and I'm not gonna have time to do this. I wonder if we could get this so that um, we basically just say something more like update that, and then UI manager dot update the UI, like, and it'll just go to each of the different things that it's got. Um, Maybe do something like this because like these game objects like could make sense. Other than they might be different game objects for the like the main menu versus the in-game stuff. Um, like maybe this character selector, like I don't know what this is, but this feels like just more UI. Like list of UI. I'm like this could be a screen. And so we could fold that into it, and then that simplifies this code over here where um, it's just one system, solve the problem once. And I think just at a really high level, because that was one of the original questions, like how do you even like, it's one thing that like somebody will just say I made this object and I made this object and it looked good, I liked it, but I don't know how to come up with that myself. And I like I said, the notion that you, if you're sitting there saying I I want it to be better and I recognize I got this problem, like that's a good, you're you're in, if that's where you are, you're in a good place, because that's what you need to be at that point to be able to start saying, well, but okay, what can I do, like what could be done. And these are like it, all of the stuff that I am sitting here talking about is stuff that I've learned from a seeing how other people did their stuff, B, like trying stuff out and just seeing what I liked and what I didn't like. Like it just comes down to, you just gotta work through it and learn it and do it, and then you'll have better ideas the next time around. Um, I mean, I have made 4 different games, probably I at least 20 different UI frameworks. Like I've done this a bunch, so I'm not like the space we're in here specifically is, you know, familiar territory. So I've learned a lot from other previous attempts, and so so if you're sitting there saying I just don't know what to do, well, if you're at least saying I feel like I got a problem and I want to figure out how to do this better, you're in a good place. The other thing is, maybe the broader comment here is, when you start to recognize, when you look at it and say I'm basically solving the same problem again, like this character selector, I'm basically solving like the same problem again. This is a lot like the screen stuff that we did. Then you want to take a step back and say, well, what would it look like if there was one system that did all of it? And I I I think we've got that already. Like if we imagine, if we just said, well, this is a screen, and then we maybe define this in our UI manager, because like the UI manager was interestingly kind of ignoring the characters. Like that is one of the states, select character, but like we don't actually do anything with it here. So like, what if we did that? Um, so solving a category of problems, especially once you recognize that you do have a category. These are things that have a lot of overlap. They're very similar. To start to think about, how do you solve that category of problems? I've got 3 of these now. How do I make it? How do I come up with a system that works for all 3 of them so they all fit in together? Is one of those things that you can do that will really help move the structure of your code into a better place. Because like I said, I look at this character selector and I think, this is just literally just more UI. I wonder if some of this is Like, I don't know that any of our other stuff was using this UI text and UI image. But I mean, here's our friend button. So like I said, I do imagine like you could have, instead of what I did here in the UI manager where it was like everything is all together and we just have these generic screens. Like I could imagine having a, public class main menu is derived from screen, and then in here you'll just replace this with screen with main menu, and then just say equals new main menu, and the main menu will go in and like add in whatever little bits and pieces that it needs. And that's the exact same thing as this character selector. That would just be yet another one of these. And then also, I think some of this stuff, because right now this has input manager.update, which we're doing kind of generically up there. And then it instead of this, it would just call the UI manager.update. It's like these multiple similar things. If we can solve the category of problems, we end up with less code, which again, the comment I made earlier about code's a liability. If you can have one thing, one system for all three of these, or for the whole category, you solve it once, you end up with a lot less code to have to manage. And when you change your mind about what that, how to handle that category of things, then it's easy to make a change in one place, and that's important. All right, I'm gonna call it quits here, and unfortunately, I probably won't have time to pick this up again. So this is probably the last time I'll mess with this code, but I've enjoyed it. Like I said, it's interesting to play with this. I will say before I walk away, this is a huge program, and the person who made this would clearly put a lot of thought and care into it. For every little thing that I've changed, like there is so much here that was just really well done from the beginning. And I think that like even like if I go look at my code that I wrote 2 weeks ago for a personal project, or if I go look at code that I wrote like for work, um, I'll find things and like, but I don't like that anymore. Like no matter what you do, you'll always be looking at your code and saying, I wish for this to be better. I want to change this about it. So you never run out of these little things to do. Um, but so yeah, you just keep working on it, and mostly object oriented design comes from doing it a bunch and analyzing carefully what's working and what's not. And you'll get there. All right, that's plenty for today. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time.